Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes.
I hear you. Good morning.
Okay, today we shall go through the last theoretical lecture concerning environmental impact assessment class. And we will finish by discussing the classical cost-benefit analysis and accountancy models. This will be an introduction to the last part of the class, in which we will have several experts coming from outside the university, and that will try to show you, demonstrate you how environmental impact assessment is carried on by environmental engineers. This is at least in Italy. So we will give you some, you will have some example of environmental engineers that come out from our class and have stepped in the real world doing really environmental impact assessment and showing, discussing by experience for you. In particular, you will have in the next weeks a lecture on life cycle assessment, a lecture on risk assessment, and you will be shown some cases in which the models employed or the models discussed in this class may be employed in the real world. And finally, you will have one lecture concerning the evaluation of ecosystem services. It is a new way, a modern way of taking into account the services provided by natural systems. So today we start with cost-benefit analysis. That is the beginning of for accountancy models. In particular, we have seen that there is several decision support tools, decision support methods, for which we have several types of classification. We have a classification that is based on the way of representation of the data, for example, graphical methods, or method based on efficiency ranking, which you do not have graphics, but instead you produce ranking of alternatives. You may say that the former, the graphical methods, are appropriate evaluations for localization of alternative with an infinite number or continuous of the alternatives, while the method based on efficiency ranking are more appropriate, suitable for the evaluation of process alternative, for example, mitigation, etc., but for a finite number of alternatives, so for discrete alternatives. So the geographical methods takes into account, are suitable for evaluating infinite numbers or a continuous number of possible alternatives, while the method based on the efficiency of ranking are essentially good or applicable for a finite number of alternatives. Classification may be also based on the way of representation of the data. In particular, we have seen a first decision support system multi-criteria methods last week. It is the father of all decision support systems. And then today we will instead discuss the other types, accountancy models, that are essentially methods based on economic budgets. And under this term, for cost-benefit analysis, budget analysis, but also the very well-known life cycle assessment that is the preferred, if you want, analytical methods for economical engineering systems. Methods that are based on budgets are also called accounting methods, are all based on the idea that the environment originally is in balance, so that what goes in the equivalent to what comes out, what goes in is equivalent to what goes out. So we start from the assumption that the environment is in a kind of equilibrium. Its opera on the territory involves a variation of incomes and outcomes that has to be assessed, and as a consequence, there is a variation of this kind of this equilibrium. The basic mechanism is the identification of an open system and of alternatives, an open system, and of all what enters and exits from the system. So the inputs and outputs shall then be accounted and a budget calculated. So we look at the environmental system as an open system, a system that uses resources, what we may call incoming resources, but also that produces some kind of resources, what we may call outcoming resources, or if you want, in the language of environmental engineers, these are impacts, environment, pollutions, effects, so effects on the surrounding environment due to the activity to the internal system. So we have from one side an evaluation of resources needed, and from another side an evaluation of waste produced that goes into the surrounding environment. Essentially, the different accounting models, they differ on the accounting methods and on the unit equivalent of measurements for making these accounts. Classically, the traditional accounting method with so-called cost-benefit analysis and similar, they start from an evaluation of cost effectiveness and cost risk benefit and so on in terms of monetary units. Another way of evaluating or changing another equivalent way of another equivalent unit of measurements for the cost benefit may be mass balance. Classically, this is the unit of mass, or energy balances, joules or watts, or the ecological footprint, what is this is an ecological unit in terms of surfaces or unit area, ecological unit area, or environmental budgets, which the unit varies, but it's generally mass, or the so classical, as I told you, life cycle assessment, in which, again, the unit varies, but in general, it is employed the mass as a unit. So economic valuation techniques of financial derivation are used to predict the effects of a project or a program or an investment. And this is rational on the basis of the cost-benefit analysis. Of course, we understand that strictly financial aspects are not exhaustive. Instead, cost-benefit analysis is also based on social criteria that are calculated with the appropriate correction from results of the financial analysis. The variables considered by the analysts are therefore essentially economic or financial. Economic or financial in monetary term, and on the other side, social, that shall be monetized. So in practice, depending on the type of analysis, you make financial or economic. In case of financial analysis, the variable is a monetary type variable, for example, euros, dollars, and so on. The prices used are the market prices, and the ambit of analysis is typically private. While if we do cost-benefit analysis in public ambits, instead the type of analysis is assumed to be economic. In this case, the variable type are economical, for example, gross domestic product, GDP, and the prices used are socials defined by social structures. So this is why I will introduce briefly, we shall employ ecosystem services evaluations also in terms of monetary or monetizable terms in order to provide cost benefits analysis for ecosystems, impacts on ecosystems. Cost benefit analysis is based on identification of pros and cons of an opera in monetary terms. So-called costs and benefit. Costs are, if you want, the cons, and benefits are the pros. These are then discounted, so referenced at the time of analysis to make them comparable. There is a problem that we shall shortly analyze, but the value of money changes in time. So if you make an economic analysis referred to today, for example, and you want to compare with economical analysis referred to previous years, then you have to do a correction that is called a discount operation. The aggregation of quantities is given by the difference between benefits and costs in order to derive a net total benefit. If a total budget is positive, then the project shall be approved. If it is negative, then the project may not be approved. So the first indicator, if you may employ, the so-called net total benefit, is trivially or banally defined as the difference between the total social benefit and the total social cost. Please note that we are talking about social costs and social benefits. So in this case, according to this subdivision, we are talking about economic analysis employing economic variables in ambits of public decision that are evaluated by using social prices. Net total benefit, total social benefit minus total social cost. There are three main steps in building a cost benefit analysis procedure. The first one, of course, is the definition of costs and benefit. The second, the evaluation of costs and benefit. And finally, the comparison of costs and benefits coming out to the results of your evaluation. Costs and benefits may be defined as, you may remember in the case of impacts, may be defined as primary or secondary. Primary costs or benefits are values that are determined by direct effects of the project, while secondary are determined by indirect effects and hence often difficult to identify. In this category, typically fall hardly monetizable items like, for example, environmental effects, landscape qualities, or environmental qualities, or other characteristics that are difficult to translate into monetary terms. The evaluation is made so that for each year life of a project, it is calculated as social benefit from which it is subtracted the corresponding total social cost, so that you obtain a net social benefit. And this is a net social benefit calculated year by year, so yearly, for the life of for lifelong of the project. A series of all net social benefits of each year life of a project will then be aggregated to an end value that allows to evaluate the project. The typical end value that we have introduced here is, for example, the net total benefit. Please note that, as I already stated, there may be temporal inconsistency of the values, especially monetary values, because, as I told you in the beginning, the cost of money or the value of money changes in time, and this is called inflation. You probably know this concept. Inflation makes is, if you want, the fact, or refers to the fact that the value of goods you may obtain employing money changes with the economic situations. In particular, how do you do the evaluation? You start by making an evaluation in different years of a lifelong of life of a project. You start at time zero, the time of analysis. For example, you evaluate the cost benefits at different time steps, typically each year, and this evaluation is made by changing the value, economical value, costs and benefits, by employing the discount rate. The discount rate, it is an indicator that tells you how much the economy is influencing the values of prices, so how much money is, how do you say, devaluated in time. In order to make this evaluation, you employ the discount rate function, the function that I have written here, in which, for example, for each year of a project, n, you evaluate an annual discount value as 1 divided by 1 plus R. R is the annual discount rate elevated to n, the number of years. If I ask you what is the discount rate today, tasso di sconto in Italian, discount rate today, or what is referred to by economists as the cost of money, today the cost of money, I'm feeling today, 2021, the cost of money is very low. So the discount rate is between 0 and 1. So we have a very stable economy in this moment, meaning that the prices are not changing significantly. If you plot this function as a function of a number of years, then the discount rate function is, of course, as you can imagine, a decreasing exponential function. There are 3 methods of comparison. The first one is the net actual value. So you calculate for each year of the project, the difference between the yearly benefits minus the yearly cost divided by each year by the discount rate function. You make a summation along all the years of the project. So if I want to make an evaluation for 10 years, I start from the year 0, then I make the summation up to the year's 10th of this net actual value. And in this case, the project will be acceptable in terms of cost-benefit analysis if the net actual value is larger than 0. You can also employ a different methodology with benefit-cost ratio. Again, you make the rate between, you make the ratio between the benefits discounted by the discount rate function and the costs discounted by the discount rate function year by year, and then you make the summation of the benefits, summation of the costs, you make the ratio, you obtain an indicator, the so-called benefit-cost ratio, and the answer of your analysis, cost-benefit analysis, is that your project is acceptable if the benefit-cost ratio is larger than 1. Instead, we have a final evaluation methodology, which is that of internal rate of return, in which you evaluate which is the rate of discount R first, R apex, how do we call it in English, such as that net and actual value is equal to 0. So you are looking at the point of inversion of this ratio in the different years of a problem. The economic convenience is if the value of R first is found is greater than the institutional discount rate. So if the institutional discount rate is what established in Italy by the Italian bank, central bank, and in Europe by the European Central Bank. If the internal rate of discount established, which you have an inversion of the net actual value of a price, is larger than the institutional discount rate, then your project is said to be acceptable from a cost-benefit analysis point of view. I give you very quickly, briefly, an historical example. The relocation of a Covent Garden market in London. This was a study carried in 1975 by Button and Barker. The key benefits was the reduction of staff, the easiness of access, the lower cost of waiting meaning waiting for goods transfer, loading and unloading times, less congestion, traffic, low waste production, and fresher products, and so on. The main costs are the acquisition of the area and the cost for the new allocation of resources and tools. So for the services that has to be implemented in order to make the system work. So they posed in the mid-70s, they posed this question: shall we relocate this historical market, the Covent Garden market in London? They made two different assumptions for the cost of work in particular. It was one of the main variables in the evaluation of costs. The first hypothesis, A, 10% reduction of labor and consequent reduction of tools and instruments. And the second scenario, hypothesis B, is a 25% reduction of labor costs and so on, of labor's need and so of labor costs. Then they calculated, they made this evaluation. This is made in millions of pounds. And as you see, the reference time is 1974. And then they made an evaluation in terms of discount rate for the prices, for the costs and benefits up to the 80s. So this is on 5 to 6, 10 years time scale. The costs were discounted at 8%. This is the official discount rate of 8% as an average value of discount rate. I recall you that I told you that nowadays we are below 1% discount rate, between 0 and 1%. So we are now in a moment in which the economy is really on a lower base. The inflation is very low, and this is considered by economists a moment of crisis. Instead, in the 70s, in the 80s, it was reasonable to forecast discount rates of the order of 10%. Then they made an evaluation of the benefits in terms of the sales of all site, cost acquisition, benefits sale, labor cost in assumption A and assumption B that are the most relevant items in the evaluation of costs, transport costs, waiting costs, these are well considerable benefit. And then from the analysis they carried, they found out that the costs were larger than the benefit. In particular, in the hypothesis A, the difference was 7.6 million pounds reduction while in hypothesis B, the result was 6.03 million pounds reduction. So costs were larger than benefits, so the results was, but it was not convenient to relocate the Covent Garden market, and so nowadays the historical Covent Garden market in London is still there. This is the type of analysis that you can carry in economical terms in order to evaluate the applicability or usefulness or the conveniency of implementing new projects, man-made projects. When we switch to evaluation of natural systems, there is a kind of problem, difficulties in making clear how to evaluate the costs and benefits in ecological terms. So we had to wait until 1997 for a very famous paper for Bob Costanza and others, maybe 50 authors of this paper, that was published in Nature, in which the title of the paper was The Value of the World's Ecosystem Services and Natural Capital. This paper was the basic founder paper of a new branch of economical science, which is called environmental economy or ecological economy, in which in evaluation of costs and benefits, somehow they tried to make a kind of estimation in monetary terms of the values of ecosystems or ecosystem services. When this paper was published in 1997, I was a little bit frustrated. I didn't like the approach because I was saying, wow, it is impossible. Why we shall evaluate a forest or a lake or a species that is in danger of being extincted in terms of money? Then the answer came to my question, to my doubt, came little by little in the following years, when I realized that when you talk to policymakers are much more prone to listen to dollars and euros instead of listening to more generic, or if you want, vague ecological or ecosystemic values. So if you go to a policymaker and you tell him, look, if you destroy this forest, you will lose X number or certain amount of money, or then the policymaker will find much more easy to understand and to sustain the position and to sustain in discussions, in arguing with the public, the position in terms of economical values. In the paper of Bob Costanza 1997, they evaluated that the services of ecological systems and the natural capital stocks that are then critical to the functioning of Earth's life super system, so they are critical to the welfare of human societies, are very difficult to estimate, and the first estimation they made in 1997 are that the world of the planet natural capital was in between 16 to 54 trillions of dollars per year. So we had the figure. The average, for example, 33 trillions dollars per year, to compare with other man-made activities or projects or implementations of projects so that we can compare if the losses are relevant or not in economical terms, if we can compare if the ecological losses are relevant also in economical terms. In particular, they found that the average natural capital was on the planet 33 trillions of dollars, while the global gross national product total is around 18 trillion per year. So you see that the value of the natural capital from the estimation that Bob Costanza made in 1997 is almost the double of the value of the man or anthropic economy. So the figure are 33 billions for the natural capital against 18 trillions for the human societies. They use the gross domestic product, GDP, as an indicator of economic value of societies. Then they were left with a problem of evaluating economic value of ecosystem, and so they provided an enormous set tables, very large tables of data, giving a help or hints in evaluating the value of natural system. For example, they tried to estimate the value of a forest, and so the costs of the natural cost, the cost on the ecosystem of cutting a forest, for example. The problem with the economic models, that is the model of supply and demand, you may recall, is that these kind of models are all linear models. And in particular, if you plot prices against the quantity, typically you have that the prices grows inversely with the quantity. So the more scarce is a product, the more it is its cost. While, for example, on the contrary, the marginal costs have a reverse linear behavior. From the economist's point of view, the point of equilibrium of this model is when you have a crossing of the lines of costs and the lines of benefits. So you evaluate benefits in terms of demand, or you may call demand the marginal benefit, and cost, supply, the marginal cost. The equilibrium of the system is when these two lines crosses. This is this model is, of course, too simplified, especially when we deal with ecosystems, when we deal with ecological products. For example, typically the cost of an ecological product tends to rise more than linearly, tends to rise vertically. So the appropriate model, probably, when you evaluate price, when you evaluate costs and benefits in terms of supply demands, is not the model of these two crossing lines. Instead, is a model in which you have two parallel lines that do never cross each other. So the equilibrium point is tending to the infinite, and this makes very problematic the evaluation of cost benefits in terms of the evaluation of cost benefit in terms of ecosystem services. So if you make a plot of the value of the world's ecosystem services in terms of natural capital all over the surface of the planet, you immediately notice, for example, that the places in which you have the largest natural capital are, for example, around the equatorial bands or the tropical bands, in which we have the largest primary productions. So you have the largest biomass production, so the largest capacity or ability of making photosynthesis. So then trapping CO2s and converting solar energy in biomass, while the lowest parts, for example, are in the desertic area, like this is the northern part of Africa, in which the natural capital is almost totally desertic. So in this area, the natural capital is very low. So by also analyzing how it changes in spaces the value of a natural capital, you may have some estimations of which are the sites or the ecosystems which more contribute to the sustainability of the natural capital. Let's conclude this lecture by giving some other indication of our way of making budgets. These are particular of historical interest because it allows you to helps you in understanding how the procedure for building environment, for building cost-benefit analysis proceeded on the basis of our knowledge of the natural capital, the value of natural capital. In particular, environmental budgets refers to voluntary disclosures documents that describe the main relations between the company or the opera and the environment. In particular, these are a list of the various sectors in which you may employ environmental budget. For example, environmental management or environmental aspects that measure the extent of the impact factor generated by the enterprise, environmental performance, environmental efficiencies. These are all, if you want, environmental components that may be employed to build environmental budgets. Environmental budgets, classical, are of two types. You may have an environmental report for a site specific. So for a large company, for example, you may have an environmental budget for each site of the different plants of the company. Or for example, this refers to individual installation or production establishment. So this is a local budget, or you may have a corporate budget, a corporate environmental report in which data covers a multi-site company and has a kind of global focus. The guidelines set by various international organizations, such, for example, CEFIC, that is the European Chemical Industry Council, or the Public Environmental Reporting Initiative, or ICLEI, that is the local government associations. These are all institutions or international organizations that provide guidelines for drafting environmental budgets. In particular, in Italy, we have a Fondazione Enrico Mattei, that is a derivation of ENI, and the CLEAR project, that is referred to cities and local environmental accounting and reporting methodologies. I think you will have a more in-depth discussion of these aspects when you will discuss voluntary tools for environmental reporting with Professor Alessandro Manzardo, one of the experts that will intervene in the discussion in the next weeks. The environmental balance is achieved through the construction of quantitative tables that describe the physical and monetary environmental management data, which initially recorded in accounts and are subsequently reworked in order to assess the efficiency or the sustainability of the company. Environmental report is structured in the following forms of accounts. We are talking of environmental budgets here. Environmental budgets are all drafted on an environmental report in which there is a discussion of the resources used, of the waste produced, of atmospheric emissions, pollution of surface water, pollution of soil and subsoil, generation of noise, environmental expenditure, and the summary of data under full accounting. So that environmental budgets is made of three main documents or report: a periodic environmental budget plan, an accounting, but it may be continuous or not. So, accounting means making the difference between estimated costs and estimated benefits, and then the environmental budget itself, but is exactly the estimation, the way you estimate the costs and benefits. The energetic balance, it is another way, another methodology of accounting. Instead of being ecological, we just focus on energy. The energy balance is based on three main issues: actual energy demand and future demand estimates, the energy supply, so how much and which type of energy is available, and the so-called environmental externalities related to energy use and production through the construction of an emissions budget. So the externalities, if you want, it was the first term with which we started thinking into ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are those services that are affected by externalities. For example, if I have a production procedure that produces, for example, CO2, CO2, it is an externalities. CO2 load in the atmosphere may be considered an externality that has a potential impact to worsen the situation of global climate change. The analysis of energy demand permits quantification of the energy flows, and its historical reconstruction permits to examine the intersectorial distribution disaggregated at the regional level to analyze the temporal evolution, reconstructing the theoretical energy requirements of each sector. And then we finish with the ecological footprint, so namely the human footprint that was developed in the 80s and the 90s, essentially in Canada, or if you want, in French-speaking countries, France and Canada. This was developed by Rees and Weckernagel in the 80s. And the ecological footprint is a method that combines the calculation of a budget with the concept of a carrying capacity of a given territory. So we reverse the question. Instead of asking how many people can the Earth sustain, we may ask how much land or how much surface or how much part of the Earth each person requires to be supported. You may understand that this evaluation is made in terms of energy needs or energetical needs, but also in terms of the capability of a system of receiving the waste produced by human activities. This is an environmental indicator, the ecological footprint. It describes the pressures coming from human activities on the basis of a total area of terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems needed for sustaining this particular activity. Measures the amount of territory needed to produce in a sustainable way all the resources that man consumes and to absorb in a sustainable way, again, the waste produced. There is also a way of calculating the ecological footprint. The indicator is defined in this way. The calculation is done by transforming consumption per capita in units of equivalent area. So a unit area of a calculation here, the unit of a calculation here is a surface. If you want hectares of land, you make a simple multiplication of a population, the measure of the average reserve consumption per person, plus and multiply by the average waste produced environment or environmental harmfulness of a technology providing consumer goods. So by simply making this multiplication, population times time resources consumed times capability of producing waste of a technology, you obtain a numerical indicator that allows you to distinguish between different ecological footprints. Typically, this evaluation, there are 5 categories of consumption, but may be considered in our language pressures. For example, need for food, need for housing, need for transport, need for consumer goods and services. And then it considers 7 environmental components that may be seen as state indicators: farmland, pasture land, managed forest, because these has to do with forestry activities, natural forests, sea area near the coast, so coastal area, and urbanized land, and use of non-renewable resources, like, for example, carbon, fossil carbon. Okay, more or less, where the ecological footprint for the analysis of consumption, you may use meat or dairy products or fruits or vegetables, legumes, wheat, tobacco, coffee, wood products, and so on, for more than 50 biotic resources, but maybe are considered. Consumption is calculated by adding to the domestic production the imports and subtracting the exports. So this is really trivial balance. And for the energy balance, it is taking into account the energy locally generated and that incorporated in more than 100 categories of marketed products. The final part of the calculation summarizes the ecological footprint in the categories considered above and provides the total per capita. Okay, and when it is important to cite other budget methodologies, in particular the TEB, Territorial Ecological Balance, that is a specific flavor of ecological footprint, or if you want, of the cost-benefit analysis. It is based on the idea that any urban area can be described as an ecosystem that consumes renewable resources and generates wastes and emissions and consumes energy and is not self-sufficient. The territorial ecological balance is a document that analyzes and reports for a given territory the data about the state of environment, air, water, soil, and subsoil, noise, biodiversity, landscape, as well as the pressure factors, population, transport, energy, waste, industrial, commercial, agriculture, and tourism. Okay, we stop here now. On next Thursday, we will have a non-lecture, meaning that we will have a meeting together in which I will propose you some topics for making your work group analysis, and I will give you a basic list of topics proposed. I will make it available on the website also, on the Moodle page of the class. And then we will go through these elements. I will give you some examples of how to carry on the analysis. And then I would like you to discuss in class or whatever you want, and to start building on some work groups. So you have to choose topics and to choose your colleagues in order to make up the work group. I will provide a tool a further tool for building up the groups on the Moodle web page of a class by employing a Moodle tool whose name is Choose Your Group. So there will be a list of groups, and then you may autonomously decide to join a particular group or to found a particular group on the basis of your willings. As I told you, I am open to receive your suggestions. This means that I will provide a basic set of possible topics, and then I'm expecting that you, especially Erasmus students or foreign students, propose a particular topic that they feel it is relevant for their country, or that they feel they are particularly comfortable with because they have already studied and they have some background on this topic. So the next lecture will be a colloquial lecture in which we will try to build up the classes, to the work groups, sorry, and to subdivide the class in work groups. I recall you that work groups are typically 2 to 5 people, and the work group is a research. The work to be carried in the work group is a compilative research on a particular topic, for which you will provide a small report, small meaning up to 10 pages, not much more than 10 pages, and you shall provide also a presentation, typically PowerPoint presentation, that each group will give to the whole class. And so the grade that each participant to the group will get is made up by the summation of the grade it will get with the report, and the grade it will get with the presentation to the class. Okay, I stop here. Do you have any questions? I stay in class to answer to your questions. Otherwise, I close, and I recall you that we will start next week with the seminars carried by external experts that will come in class and teach their specializations. If you cannot attend the next lecture, then you will join one of the groups that will be formed during next lecture.